The M16 is iconic. It's as ever-loved as it is overseen, and as much as I want to just be cynical about it, I'm nostalgic to seeing a carry handle M16 in a COD game. It's just right, it just makes sense. And this game, when it came out, had probably one of the worst M16s we've ever seen in the franchise, and now, in my opinion, has one of the best. Now, it's not, stopping power M16 from MW2 or COD 4. No, this M16's more reminiscent of the Modern Warfare 3 M16, which if you've used that, you know that, oh, it's good. I don't need to bore you guys with the real-life history of the M16, or the use case, or the appearance. I don't need to, because it's an M16 in a COD game, you get it. Now, my experience with this rifle is interesting, because when it was considered its worst, I actually got it to max level and enjoyed using it, because it was a really high risk, high reward. The risk sort of outweighed the reward, but it worked and I could use it, I could have fun. Now it's buffed to a point where I think it's downright competitive and kind of scary. Back when the M16 was at its worst, everybody said that it needed either lower recoil or a faster fire rate, or less burst delay. And Infinity Ward decided to do both. They made it more accurate and allowed you to get more bursts off quicker. So in my opinion, they did 2 buffs when they probably only needed to do 1. I'm glad I waited for the Season 1 update before reviewing this weapon, because I was going to review it before and talk about how it's high risk, high reward, and it shouldn't be used in these areas, and now I'm reviewing a monster. Now that I've waited for it to get a buff, I'm reviewing a monster. According to Simthic.com, this weapon is going to be effective within 60 meters with a 3 to 4 shot kill, meaning 1 or 2 bursts should drop your opponents, and with only a 110 millisecond burst delay. That's scary. Now, when the game came out, this was a 160 millisecond burst delay, and you could really feel it. If you missed a burst, you were likely going to lose the gunfight because of how fast the TTK is in this game. And now at 110 milliseconds, you are able to get a second burst on target very quickly. And the rate of fire within that burst, the 3 rounds themselves fire at around 810 RPM. And so, yeah, you're killing somebody in potentially 3 shots at 800 RPM to the upper body. They'll get dropped before they can react if you're ready for them. Basically, keep your target within 60 meters, and they're going to have a hard time beating you in a gunfight that you're prepared for. That brings me to the do's and don'ts of the M16. The M16 is a mid-range monster, which at close range can excel sometimes, and at long range can excel sometimes, but for the most part, you want to keep your engagements at mid-range against larger targets, and by that I mean you don't want to be challenging head glitchers too often with this weapon. Unless you are building it for total recoil control, you're going to have trouble hitting small head glitching targets, so I would definitely try to put yourself in positions to guard mid-range choke points, because anybody that has their full body visible to you is likely going to get dropped within that, 800 plus RPM burst. It's just that the recoil of a burst rifle and how you have to wait for it to reset doesn't really lend it to hitting small targets at a distance, and because there is a burst delay, it is a burst weapon, which means it requires more precision. Close range, quick draw gunfights aren't going to be your best case scenario either, so your do's and don'ts are really just stick to mid-range against full-body targets versus close-range quick draw or long-range, tiny targets. So what are the best practices for this bursty boy? Other than eating and being hydrated, there's not much to do with the M16, just a little mantra you should be repeating to yourself. Sights up or lights out. If you get into an engagement where you have to aim down sight, acquire the target, and start firing bursts, you're likely going to lose against some of the faster full autos in the game, especially in interiors or close-range engagements against SMGs. Some weapons in this game have crazy sprint out times, and you're just not going to beat them with a burst rifle if you're not ready. That doesn't mean this gun is campy and slow and terrible, but if you want to use it to the best of its ability, a more methodical approach is going to be important. So you want to have your sights up at as often as possible, anywhere where you can sort of predict an enemy to be. So aim walking movement speed, in my opinion, is very important. The weapon is less of a weapon and more of a one-on-one gunfight winning tool. It's not a gun, it's not an assault rifle, it is a one-on-one people deleter. Those quick draw rapid gunfights are going to be your biggest weakness, so you want to focus on preparedness. Because remember, it's sights up or lights out, so what you want to do is bring things like motion detectors, snapshot grenades, you want to make sure you have a UAV in the air. You want to maximize the chances that you are ready for an opponent where they're not ready for you. Now, when it comes to certain playstyles, stealth isn't a bad thing to consider when using a burst weapon, as it is something more methodical and it might fit a slower, lurkier playstyle. But long flank stealth weapons and classes are usually designed for the unexpected, because you don't know what's going to happen when you stroll into the enemy spawn or stroll around just in general. And burst weapons aren't the best for those unexpected gunfights that can happen as you are treading into enemy territory and trying to utilize stealth. And utilizing stealth in Modern Warfare 2 is hard enough as it is, as the perk system just isn't very good. So I wouldn't say building a stealth flanking class would be a good idea, but too much unwanted attention can mean the end of your streak. You are using something that's more akin to a DMR than an AR, so keep that in mind. But if you're confident, luring enemies into your sights isn't a bad option, because if your sights are up, the gunfight's already a quarter of the way won for you, so don't be shy. So let's actually get into the attachments, because that's the next point I want to touch on. There are 3 main attachments I think you should focus on when using the M16, and it's a little devilish, it's a little randy, it's a little zany, but I hope you'll follow me here. I'd like to put a laser on that enemies can see. A lot of times when an enemy sees a laser beaming around a corner, they jump out because they think, okay, well, now I'm expecting you, I know that you're aiming. But if they don't know you're aiming with the M16, they're gonna jump out thinking that they're gonna have a gunfight, not that they're going to have their upper chest clicked on and just be deleted out of the match. So I would use a laser that is visible to enemies that helps with aim down sight speed and aiming stability. You want aiming stability with the M16 because you want that first burst to land. Then I think you're gonna want an optic that gives you a clear sight picture. Some people are really confident with iron sights, and maybe I'm just a baby, and throughout my weapon reviews, we'll see just how much of a baby I am. But with the M16, I want the clearest sight picture of the person in front of me. So I'm gonna use a red dot or a really clean scope, something that allows me to get a full picture of my target before I pull the trigger. It is a burst rifle, not a semi-auto spammable rifle, and not a full auto rifle that I can sort of spray and pray with. So I wanna make sure that my dot is fully on the target before I pull the trigger. That's easier with a red dot than the iron sights. The next thing I'd recommend is the Demo Fade Pro stock. This stock is going to allow you to move around with your sights up quite a bit faster. Then for your underbarrel and your muzzle, I would say pick things that are going to reduce the amount of recoil while also increasing aiming stability. I'd say if you're on a really small hectic map, changing out a muzzle attachment for the Demo 501 Factory is a pretty good idea, because the first burst accuracy with this is still gonna be pretty damn good, and you're just gonna be a lot lighter on your feet. So you might wanna switch to the Demo 501 Factory barrel if you're on a small, cramped map. And my personal choice for underbarrel is the F-Tac Ripper 56, but again, when it comes to recoil control in this game, there are lots of different muzzle attachments, lots of different underbarrels, and I encourage you to experiment in the firing range with what feels the best to you. Now when it comes to class setups, it's a little hard. There aren't any perks that I would specifically say you should use or shouldn't use with the M16. I would say use lethals and tacticals that allow you to be ready for enemies, so proximity mines or shock sticks, maybe a heartbeat sensor. And then for field upgrades, I would say portable radars are obviously good. Also, the DDoS system is really good for finding nearby enemies. You just want to be ready for your enemy. Whatever allows you to optimize being ready for your enemy. I don't have to spell that out for you guys. You know, making sure you have a UAV in the air, making sure you have some way to detect enemies nearby, maybe a snapshot grenade. That's going to help you. Now, the only other little perk thing I could mention is that the perk Quick Fix is pretty fun to use with the M16 against multiple opponents, because you can fire one burst into somebody, kill them, immediately start getting your health back because you have Quick Fix on, and then start taking out the next person. It can make you, it just feels really good. There's something about pulling the trigger once on somebody and starting to get your health back with something that's more aggressive than a DMR, but less aggressive than a traditional assault rifle. So something to consider. In my experience, the focus perk hasn't been necessary, fast hands hasn't been necessary, but again, perks are so weird in this game, it's sort of just up to you. Just, again, when you're making your class, think preparedness over anything. My weapon reviews aren't about top 10 class setups or the absolute best way to run something. Sometimes it's really just a matter of there are best practices here, but I want you to experiment and customize it on your own. If you want to have fun with the M16, just remember aim walking movement speed, aiming stability, a clear sight picture, and preparedness. You want to be ready for your targets because you don't have a rifle in your hands, you have a one-on-one engagement winning tool. When you think of it that way, the gun just sort of sings, it sort of works, and before they nerf it, because I think they might, I would recommend getting in your kills with it, leveling it up, It's one of the better burst rifles we've seen in Call of Duty as of late, and that's going to wrap it up for my review of the M16. A solid weapon that rewards preparedness. That's what it is, so go out and use it that way. You have a peopled leader in your hands. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. And yeah, my weapon reviews aren't full of stats. They're not how to get a nuke with the M16 videos. It's just basically my thoughts and experiences after leveling it up and getting several hundred kills with the weapon itself. So see you when I see you guys. Goodbye.